Welcome back to All Things Avennia. My name's Eli Travers, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Over the last few weeks, we've taken a topic and talked about it. I've done a presentation. We've had chances for questions and answers. But today we're going to do a new varietal support group. And so I thought that it would be a good chance, a good opportunity for people to try new things, to have a fun, safe environment to share, to explore some new wines and some new things. And I can see a cat on the screen, and that's really exciting. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go over sort of the initial ground rules of today's support group. So I just want to say that stepping outside of your comfort zone is scary. And it's okay. I applaud you for taking that chance and for trying something new. What you say here can stay here. So as far as confidentiality, feel free. You can share things. Now, like I said before, we are recording. But at any point, if you don't want to be recorded, or if you don't want your pretty face or your beautiful voice being heard in the eventual recording that will go up on the website, just let me know. You can tell me, you can put it in the chat box, and I'll make sure to edit that out so that it's not there for the world to see. So feel free, be yourself, tie into your emotions. We're all about that today. We're not here to judge you. All new wine experiences, whether that's positive or negative experiences, are true, valid, and will not be discounted, made fun of, or shamed. And I'm going to hold all of you to that. Everyone who wants a chance to share can share. If you don't want to share, we're not going to force you to share. You can be silent the whole time, and that's also okay. And then I just encourage all the members to listen to each other, give support, even if you want to chat through your support through the chat box. You can give some silent applause if you want to wave too, if you think, if you're excited for someone in their new journey. And then lastly, it's okay to feel insecure about wine. The wine world is really big, really confusing. There's a lot that goes into it. And we're not supposed to know everything about it. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not like certain things and to be honest about that. And that's okay. And at the end of the day, it comes down to what you want to drink, no matter what. There's nothing wrong with not enjoying something. This is just one, safe, supportive way for you to explore new wines, and that's what it's there for. So, before we start, there's no presentation today. I'm not doing a PowerPoint. There's no share screen or anything. So, my hope is that some people will volunteer to maybe go first. I'll go first. That way I can sort of show you or tell you the kind of things I'm thinking about as far as how to look at the wine, taste it, smell it, talk about it, and then also put in your own opinion or emotions into what you're tasting. And then I'll just go through. If people want to share, they can, and you can either wave at me or chat or unmute. So the new varietal support group, the one term there that people use often that might get confused is the term varietal. So I want to explain that real quick. Varietal, ending in ale, is the term for a wine that's made from a single variety. So a lot of times you'll hear variety or a variety of a plant or a certain species of plant. But when we talk about varietals, we're talking about, say, a Pinot Noir. So it would be a bottle made from Pinot Noir or a Chardonnay. Now, it's hard because with wine laws and labeling laws, you might have a blend. There might be a wine that's labeled as a Cabernet Sauvignon, but it'll have 20%, or it'll have 20% Merlot, and it'll have 5% something else. And it still will be called a Cabernet, but it's still technically a blend. That's okay. If you grabbed a wine that ended up being a blend, you're not going to be kicked out because you didn't bring a full-on varietal to the new varietal support group. But the idea is to challenge you to find new varieties, to find new grapes specifically that you might not be used to. But pulling back even further, maybe you're a red wine drinker and you've never tried white, or you just don't like white wine. This would be a chance to try any white wine, even if it's a blend. That's totally okay, just to try something totally different. So I'm going to start and share what wine I brought. Now, it's hard because I've been studying wine and tasting wine a lot over the last 6 or 7 years. So there's a lot of wines that are on the shelves and things I've already tried. But luckily, I know some great wine retailers and people here in the area that get weird, obscure things. And when I'm looking for weird, obscure grapes that I've never tried before, I go to Italy, the country of Italy, because they have thousands of grape varieties. A lot of them never even leave the shores of Italy, but you'll find some really, really cool grapes. So what I got is Caravaggio's Nero de Monte Corinto. Oh man, that's so bright. You can't even see that. Corinto Nero. Corinto Nero. So that's the name of the grape. And this is coming from the island of Salina, which is part of the Aeolian island chain. So this is just north of Sicily. So we're in the Mediterranean Sea, right at the toe of the boot of Italy. It's basically kicking the ball, kicking Sicily, if Sicily was the football. And right above the toe are these little chain of islands, and Salina is one of those islands. So volcanic soil, they're all volcanic islands. And the grape Corintonero is a really, really old grape. It originated in Greece. Corinto is taken from the same root as Corinth, if you think about Greek nomenclature. And it's a dark red, it makes dark red grapes or wines, and it's a mix of fruity. But the coolest thing I found out about this grape that I had no idea is it's seedless. So it's one of the few varieties out there that naturally has no seeds inside the grape. And so it's often used for raisin production as well, because you can dry the grapes out and you don't have to worry about having seeds or pips inside the raisin, which I thought was really interesting. So about on this island, this really small island, about half the Corintonero grapes are made into wine, the other half are made into raisins. And then what I'm gonna do as I smell and taste is just get some overall impressions of the wine. So some of the main questions I like to ask, and the things I might ask you when you're trying some wine, is if, does it smell or taste like one of three things, which is fruit, or is it earthy, or is it wood or oaky? Those are out of all the flavors and descriptors we can have about wine, they usually fall into those three. So when I smell this wine, to me, I get fruit. There's definitely some fruit there, but I also get a lot of earth. That this, and maybe it's the power of suggestion with volcanic soil, but there is almost this red, almost brick volcanic, almost brimstone, almost funk to it. But it's an earthy, mineral, rocky, volcanic earth note to the wine. And maybe it's also that raisination or that raisinated idea. I get a lot of dried fruit quality. So when I smell this, it smells like strawberries and raspberries and cherry, but there's also almost a dried strawberry, as if it was slightly shriveled. And it's really pretty. And part of the pretty aroma to me, there's almost a floral component here. So maybe rose petal. And then when I taste it too, there is this earthy mineral, sort of funky mineral base to the wine. So it's kind of all this pretty floral fruit stuff on top of this really earthy bottom, but it's delicious. I mean, this wine, it's not super intense. It's not super alcoholic. I think it's only 13.5% alcohol, at least on the label. It's not too tannic. It's got this freshness to it, which I think is really attractive. It reminds me, if we're thinking of what it could taste similar to, there's other Italian wines that I think about, like Barbera, that it's similar to. But part of that is because a lot of Italian red wines have similar characteristics, this herbal characteristic or earthy, that all up and down the peninsula, you can get some similar style red wines. But to me, there's also almost a Pinot Noir component to it. I think part of it is the aromatics, where you have red fruits and a little floral, maybe even cola, like this cola, like cherry cola, that kind of aroma, which is common in some Pinot Noir wines. I get an element of that in here. So for me, I think this wine is really fun. I'll definitely taste it again. The sort of emotional connection to this wine, I went and got this from my friend Chris Horn, who used to be my boss because he's known for getting a lot of really fun varietals from all over the world on his list. And this was also one of the favorite wines of a dear friend of ours, Janice Dean, who passed away a couple of years ago from cancer. She was a sommelier, really amazing woman, who unfortunately lost her battle with cancer. But this was one of her favorite wines. She loved Italian wines, and this was one of those that she kept going back to. So it's fun to drink in her memory too. So that's that. That was my time to share this new varietal. I'm impressed. I'm excited to find more of this, and yeah, that's kind of what we're doing today. So, is there anyone after that? Is there anyone that wants to dive in and be some of the first to share about a new experience in the wine world? Anyone? And you'll be able to ask questions too. I'm here. I'm prepped and ready to go with grape variety sheets and compendium and all these apps to help answer questions in real times that we hopefully don't have to fact check too much. Robin.
Well, Mark unmuted me, so I guess I'm gonna go. So I don't do very many varieties, but we did get this Beaujolais, which was 100% Gamay.
Yep, Gamay Noir, beautiful.
Yep, and we looked up, and it is from the Burgundy area, right?
Yes. Yeah, so Beaujolais, is a subsection of Burgundy. So Burgundy is a larger region in central, sort of north central France. And most of the Burgundy we think of the Côte d'Or, so your Gevrey-Chambertin and your Pommard and Volnay, some of those really expensive wines are from the northern parts. Beaujolais is the furthest south part of Burgundy. It's actually a lot closer to Lyon and the northern Rhone Valley than it is to the top part of Burgundy. So this is basically a section of rolling hills, and then the plains there that go down close to Lyon.
We got this variety because the lady in the grocery store in front of us got 5 bottles. And I said, "You really like that one?" She said, "That's all I drink."
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So it's sort of a light red, and I would say it's pretty fruity. But you can smell the earth kind of thing. Strawberry, I get a strawberry flavor. But I don't know. Mark even took a sip, which he never does. He said it smelled like grapes.
Yeah.
Well, you know how Concord grapes have that foxy taste and smell? It's a little bit foxy.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that. So I think there's a couple things that might explain the grapiness. And it's funny because I've used grapey as a descriptor for Gamay Noir before in blind tastings. And part of it is a lot of Beaujolais. So Beaujolais, it's the name of the region. It's also the name of the appellation, Beaujolais, just generic Beaujolais. And it has to be, by law, 100% Gamay Noir. But then there's these 3 main quality levels of Beaujolais. You have Beaujolais at the bottom, which could be from anywhere in that region. And then what you have, that label says Beaujolais Village. There's the hyphen and then Village after that. That's the second tier. So it's considered a different appellation. And that's made from wine from specific villages, so village in the region. And then at the top end of the spectrum, you might see Cru Beaujolais, CRU, which is just the French word for growth. But those are some of the, I think there's 10 specific villages that are crus. This is where you get Morgon or Chenas, Julianas, some Moulin-à-Vent, some famous little villages, little hamlets even, that make Beaujolais. But what's interesting about the bottom two, the Cru Beaujolais can get pretty complex. They can still be fruity, but they can get a lot earthier and even bigger and a little more substantial, a little more tannin. But both Beaujolais and Beaujolais Village can have a good portion of the wine go through carbonic maceration. And carbonic maceration it's a fairly unique winemaking process where they actually they don't inject, but they can close off the fermentation vat and pump CO2 in, and without crushing the grapes. So these are whole clusters of grapes. And what it does, instead of crushing the grapes to get juice to start fermentation, where you convert sugar into alcohol, It starts this intracellular fermentation. It's not necessarily fermentation, but it's a process where the grape skin hasn't burst yet, but inside the grape, because there's not enough oxygen, it starts to change and morph into alcohol or morph into a liquid. And that process, that carbonic maceration process, can result in some really interesting esters and some estery aromas that a lot of people describe as pear drop, banana, bubblegum, and grapey. And grapey is the one a lot of times I will get. And it can explain a lot of that fruitiness. You know, Beaujolais, the other famous connection with Beaujolais is Beaujolais Nouveau. So if you're around Thanksgiving time, the third week of November, famously is when Beaujolais Nouveau is released upon the world. And it's basically the celebration of that year's harvest. So when you harvest grapes between August and October, fermentation takes a while, and then you usually age the wine. That takes a little bit longer, and you normally don't release those wines till the following year. But because of carbonic maceration, you can speed up that process to have a finished wine, to have a wine that still has gone through fermentation. It's converted most of its sugar and alcohol. And it does this really quick turnaround, and then you can have this finished wine in bottle by the third week of November. And so it's become this celebration of the harvest where you can have Beaujolais. And because of that quickness, it reminds you a lot of juice, of grape juice or grapiness. And a lot of our grape juice is Concord grapes, or can also have that kind of musky, sort of foxy aroma. The other foxy thing you might be getting to is because of that whole cluster fermentation or having a lot more stems, you can get more herbaceous, stemmy characteristics in the wine. A lot of times I'll get bay leaf or thyme or sort of resinous herbs when I smell Beaujolais, and it's from that too. It's from the more stems that are just part of the whole process. But I'm glad. Do you like it? What's your?
I do like it, and we had chicken for dinner, so it went well with it.
I was gonna say it's a perfect turkey wine. It's a Thanksgiving chicken, poultry, turkey wine. All those herbs and maybe some cranberry sauce. Like that's what I think of when I think of turkey and chicken.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Fun. Well, thanks for sharing, Mom. That was fun. That was great. Is there anyone else who wants to share what wine they are trying maybe for the first time? Casey? Hey, how's it going?
Hi. Good, thank you. So I'm cheating a little bit. I had this varietal about 15 years ago. It's Petit Syrah. So still new to me since it's been so long. So I've just got a Washington Yakima Valley,
Okay.
and it's interesting. It's very dark tasting, plummy, maybe a slightly raisiny. I definitely pick up like alcohol towards the end.
Yeah.
And a little bit of tannin.
Yeah. That's great. Who's the producer that you got?
This is Sparkman,
Okay.
Ring of Fire.
By the way, I'm gonna try to write down all these wines too, so that tomorrow or when we post what's usually the fact check, we might still have to fact check some things, but I'll also put a list of all the wines you all tried too. So if some of you think, oh wow, that sounds really great, you'll know what it is or maybe where to find it. That's so fun. So yeah, Petit Syrah, what a unique grape. And I think if you've had something 15 years ago, then it's totally fine that it's still pretty new to you. Because I don't remember anything I tasted 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, Petit Syrah. It's funny because the common misconceptions of that grape of Petit Syrah is that it's related to Syrah, which it's actually not. It's a totally separate grape. And one of the reasons it's called Petit Syrah is more how it looks in the glass. So like you said, it's pretty dark, and it might have sort of the Syrah-like flavors of black and blue fruits and sort of this really intense concentration. But it's called petite because of the berry size. So the grape cluster of Petit Syrah has these smaller berries, and part of the result of smaller berries on the cluster is you get more skin to juice ratio, and so you might get more color molecules, the anthocyanins that turn it bigger color, but you also might get more tannin. And I'm wondering, do you find it pretty tannic? Is it a pretty intense drying wine?
Not so much. It's 2014, so maybe a little bit died out, but on the end there's a little bit.
Okay, that's great to know though, because that's fun. Actually, in a couple weeks, Chris, our winemaker, is gonna join me for an All Things Avennia, and we're gonna taste some older vintages of the new wines we'll be releasing that week. This are Sestina and Valerie, and part of the conversation is going to be about aging wines and how wines will change as they age. And it's funny because I would love to try a Petit Syrah with 6 or 7 years of age on it, because to me, Petit Syrah can be pretty intense. When it's really young, there can be a lot of tannin, again, that color. A lot of people will use the term inky to describe it, again, because it's concentration. And it can really stain your lips and your tongue because it's so intense. But I think maybe having a little age on it, where you have tannin molecules and color compounds combine, and they precipitate to the bottom and form sediment, and it strips the wine of some of that intensity maybe, and could yield a more, ethereal, aromatic experience. I mean, it sounds really, really cool, really interesting.
The mouthfeel is good. The end, I'm not too happy with. Like, it's like a little bit of bitterness comes in, and the alcohol shows up. And strangely enough, like, it almost tastes like I get more of the acidity at the end too, which I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Because the other thing, and this might be a fact check moment, but I was reading about acid in aged wines, and acid, the perception of acid can decrease over time because it turns into ethyl alcohol, or a different type of acid, and that can feel rounder. But it can also, at a certain point, after that point where it softens, as more and more sediment falls to the bottom, the acidity can go back up, or the perception of acidity can go back up because it's losing its fruit and its body. So that could be part of the reason why. It also could just, there's lots of things, who knows what they're doing as far as their aging or their oak regiment, or how they were fermenting it. Petit Syrah is also, it's pretty rare not pretty rare, because you can find some, but to find it as a full varietal, a lot of times it's used as a blending partner with Zinfandel down in California, or with Zinfandel and Carignan, or some other sort of Rhone varieties. But it is such an intriguing grape. I'm really glad you brought that and opened it. That's super fun.
Yeah, I don't see too many of them, at least locally.
Yeah, yeah, definitely not. I was gonna say Sparkman. Maybe I can think of one other producer in Washington that's making one, but it's pretty rare. It's a pretty rare grape. Cool. Yeah, and then that bitterness too. I've definitely had a Petit Syrah that ended bitter, and not knowing whether that was a grape skin thing, just a sort of a tannin thing. Oops, or something different. So awesome. Well, thanks for sharing.
Great. Thank you.
You think you'll try again at some point, or do you, or maybe if you have a certain food or dish in mind that you would bring out again?
I was thinking about food, and honestly, I don't think I would enjoy this with most of the food that I would eat. So I don't know. I think more just a after dinner kind of sipper. But I would try it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I bet it would overpower a bunch of different foods because of the intensity.
Maybe some of those cheeses you were talking about last time. Maybe a big cheese.
Yeah, totally. Or just sitting by the fireplace. I think you're right. Like as a sipping wine when it's cold out. Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. See, that's great. Petit Syrah. Oh, this is great. Tour. Beaujolais Village. Any other takers? I see Logan's unmuted here. Hello.
Yes, we were always told if it's white and Italian, try it. So, we're drinking Arne from the Piedmont area of Italy. It's a white wine. It's a 2013. It is, which 2013 may be a little bit old for white wine. For this white wine, I'll let you tell me about that. But it's a little darker yellow than most white wines we've had. It tastes like, or smells and tastes like a stone fruit, like a peach, and a peach melon type flavor. And Lisa likes Sauvignon Blanc better, but it's not bad.
Yeah. Who is the producer? Do you have the winemaker?
Corinto Nero de Montezemolo.
Montezemolo. Cool.
That's with a Texas accent.
That's good. Montezemolo. Oh, cool. Very cool, from the Langhe. Great.
Right.
Yeah. So Arnase is such a cool grape, and I looked it up because you told me right before we pressed record what you were drinking. And Arnase has been around for a long time, but it fell out of, it wasn't really grown a lot or made into wine recently through most of the 20th century. Part of this was because in Piedmont, a lot of those producers were, as soon as Barolo and all the Nebbiolo wines became more and more popular and were garnering higher price tags, a lot of producers were like, well, I'm not going to waste time making white wine that I can't charge as much money for. And so they would rip out white grape vines and plant Nebbiolo instead, or Barbera or Dolcettos, the two other sort of main red grapes that you would make in Piedmont. So a lot of it got ripped up and just wasn't happening. It was on the verge of extinction. But then in the 1970s, there was only two producers that were making Arnase, and that was Bruno Giacosa and Vietti. Vietti is a pretty popular producer. If you might recognize their label because they make a whole range of other wines, and it really was them that kept it going. Vietti in particular was the one that stood by Arnase, kept making it, and then starting in the 80s and 90s, it started gaining more popularity, so that now we have other producers like this Cordero Montezemolo that's making it as well. I like that you said if it's white and Italian, you should try it. Did I tell you that? Because I totally think that. I think
The book that you.
Yeah.
Was that from that Corkin book that your Chris wrote?
Oh yeah, Cook and Cork. Yeah. That's so, and it's true. I mean, when it comes down to food and wine pairing or finding wines that might go well with a lot of foods, Italian white wines tend to just go well with a lot of things. And I think it's because it has acidity, but it's not crazy acidity. It's not your Riesling, your Sauvignon Blanc, or certain Chablis, something that can be high acid. That the acidity is elevated, but not glaring. And I think that makes it a little more versatile. And then again, like the red wines of Italy, a lot of the white wines also have sort of an herbaceousness. And I'm wondering, it might be harder, although the 2013 vintage means it's been in bottle for a little longer for a white wine. And that also might describe why the color is a little more golden. It might have a little more color naturally if it was a more youthful vintage. But a lot of that can just come from aging, from oxidation. It'll start browning or start turning the wine more golden. But that can also, as the white wines age more, sometimes you'll lose the herbaceousness, or you'll lose some of those green aromas and green flavors, and that peachy stone fruit might take over. So that totally makes sense. What do you find it to be like pretty acidic, or is it more? Is there a richness to it?
It's got a little richness to it. It's not too acidic.
Yeah.
Tastes good.
Good. So it's a thumbs up wine experience, maybe.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've about finished the bottle, so it must be.
That's a good sign. What more can you ask for there? Oh, that's fun. Yeah, Arnase, it's not very common. There's not a lot of it. It might be hard to find depending on where you are or what wine stores you have nearby, but I definitely think it's worth seeking out. I really like those white Italian varieties, for sure.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are there certain white wines that should be aged that long and certain white wines that shouldn't be aged that long, or certain like regions where you think, oh, Italian wines age better than other white wines?
That's a great question. I think there's certain things that will assist a wine in aging, and meaning it'll it'll keep the wine going and it won't oxidize too quickly, or it won't break down too quickly. And those main things are acidity and sugar. And then phenolics is the other thing. So when you think about tannin in red wines, those tannin molecules are those phenolic compounds. You can have phenolics in white wine as well that come from the skins. Certain varieties, Viognier, Albarino has some, Gruner Veltliner. There are some white wines that have phenolic components, but acidity and sugar and phenolics are the main things that'll help a wine age and stay fresh. So I think it's less about what region they're coming from, and it will more come down to style and well, I guess region could, because of tradition. So when I think of aged white wines, I immediately think of white Bordeaux. So these are blends of Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon from Bordeaux. But I think the key there is the Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc is a high acid grape, so you have acidity that can help it age longer. Semillon, I think, has some phenolic presence also, but it is part of the style because their reds are known for their oak aging or their barrique aging. Their whites are also known for that, and so the oak can also help give it a little more structure to age well. Rioja is another place where you get older white wines that's part of the style. And again, because the tradition in Rioja is for prolonged oak aging. But when I think of other white wines that, to me, get better with age is Riesling. Riesling in Germany, from all over, but the Mosel River Valley would be one example where you have really, really high acidity, but you also have some sugar. A lot of these wines will have a little residual sugar. So that combination of sugar and acid will keep those wines going for a long time, and they'll still stay pretty fresh. But that's not to say that you could find, a Chardonnay maybe a Napa Chardonnay that aged for 6 or 7 years that maybe didn't have a lot of acidity, or it didn't have a lot of sugar, but it still kind of tastes good because maybe you really like nutty, oxidized sort of, that profile of white wine. So I think a lot of it comes down to personal preference too. There's definitely people that don't like oxidized or bruised fruit tasting wines, and then there's some people that go crazy for them, like really, really old champagne that tastes like dried apricots and stale bread, but they can be delicious. So yeah, good question. Who else? Does anyone else have a new wine, a new experience they want to share? Donna, yeah.
So we went to Italy for a white as well, but we picked a German varietal.
Ooh.
So it's Sylvaner, which I don't believe we've had before, but we've had several other whites from this producer, Abbazia di Novicella, and that we love, Pinot Grigio and a Gruner. Mm-hmm. So we knew we'd like this. We just picked it up today. It's 2019, and it's citrusy, but it doesn't scream acid, but it's citrusy. You get a little grapefruit on the taste, a little. It's not herbaceous at all. It's a light gold in color, but we like it. We're going to have a vegetarian dinner tonight, and I think it'll go well with our various vegetable dishes.
That's awesome. Do you know where? So that producer you said, do you know where?
Alto Adige.
I was going to say it's probably far north up in the
mountains.
Yeah, northeast.
Yeah. We like the whites from that region.
Yeah, I do too. I like the reds from that region too, and I think because there's a freshness to it. And if you remember, I think one of the first weeks, or someone asked where I wanted to plant a vineyard, and I was like, anywhere where you can plant really lean whites and lean reds, like cool climate. And Alto Adige is such a great region for those types of grapes. And Sylvaner is cool. So Sylvaner is grown. I guess all around the Alps, when you think about different regions that grow it, you can see it in northern Italy, in Alto Adige, but also in Alsace and certain parts of France that butt up to the Alps, and then in southern Germany, you get some Sylvaner. One of the famous places for Sylvaner is Franken or Franconia in Germany, and that's one of the places where it's specifically bottled in these really squat, weirdly shaped bottles called Boxbeutel. I'm going to draw a picture. I'm not a great drawer, but you'll get the idea based on this drawing, where the bottle almost looks like this.
Mm.
You know, it's and it's part of it's just tradition. But you're right, Sylvaner. It can, and I've had a couple Sylvaners before that tasted like yours, that tasted really bright and citrusy. And I wonder if that's more related to the Alto Adige from that region, being very alpine, higher elevation, cooler climate. I've had a Sylvaner from Alsace before that was a lot riper, but that makes sense because Alsace, there's a lot more sunlight. It's a slightly warmer wine region, and so I think it can get riper and act a little differently. But what a cool grape, and what a fun wine.
And I like it because it's got a little, I thought it'd be kind of like a Pinot Grigio or something we've had from them, but it's got more body to it.
It does.
So it's
yeah.
almost like you mixed a Pinot Grigio and a Chardonnay or something, but it's still very, very citrusy and minerality. And so it's very tasty, very clean and fresh. This could be a good summer wine too. We gotta get more.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh man, that sounds delicious. And thanks for holding the label up to the screen, because when I edit the video and look back, I can pause it and actually write down the
and that producer's great. We've had their Gruner and their Pinot Grigios, and we just love. This is one of our favorite producers now. And we haven't had a lot of it, but but they're great.
To find a producer too that you can get behind, especially when it is from another region or in a different language. I think it's fun to be able to find a producer that you enjoy, and then just try, if you're able to source them, like if there's a store that in that producer, which is one thing,
right,
to try a bunch of different wines from that producer, because I think that's super important, is almost trusting that they're going to just make good wines no matter what.
It's a little less risky. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, nice. Wow, 2 Italian white wines. That's exciting. Well, 3 Italian wines in general.
Yeah.
So that's great. Yeah, Mary Margaret. Thank you, Donna.
So 2 Italian reds also. So this is a grape I had never heard of before, called Negro Amaro. Sorry for the wine drips down the side.
Beautiful. No judgment in this new report group.
So I walked down 2 blocks from where I live, and there's a great little wine store that only has about 100 bottles at any given time, and they curate it really interestingly. And this was under a label that said limestoney, and it had lots of different types of wines underneath it, and this was one of them. And so I was all excited, and I bought this, and I told the guy that was selling me the wine, like, my nephew's doing this great thing. He didn't seem quite as excited as I thought he should be, but anyway, so I opened it up about an hour, before I started drinking it. And like I said, I've never decanted anything before, but I thought, okay, I'm going to try that. And so the first sip of it was really kind of funky, and then it's like the taste bloomed a little after I sipped it. And then subsequent tastes of it were not quite as didn't have the same kind of funk, but it definitely feels both kind of some of the things you were saying, like a little dried fruit, a little earthy, it's fruity, and again, the taste just seems to expand after you drink it and after you wait around a little while. And again, this is from Puglia, which is the heel of the boot.
Yep.
So yeah, I really like it. And from, like a family and bunch of friends who like big red wines, this fits right in there. And I'm not sure that this is like a great sit around the fire and drink it kind of wine.
Not necessarily a food wine or something you have with food. Yeah. That's so fascinating. That's great. Negro Amaro. It's a cool. It's funny because there's a lot of grapes in southern Italy, whether that's Puglia, like you said, the heel, or Campania, which is the toe, or Sicily. All these places in sort of the southern half that can have similar characteristics across the board, where you might have the dried fruit, and part of it is just because there's so much sun that you get more raisins on the cluster. A lot of times by the time they're picking it, they've had a little too much sun, so you can get some ripeness that way. A lot of it is, sometimes volcanic soil, but you're right, limestone. There's a lot of limestone in Puglia, and that's a grape that really likes limestone soils. And the funk is what I'm interested in too. And it's hard. Funky is one of those terms in wine drinking that's hard because it could be related to a lot of different things. And funk can be unique to you as it would be to me or Donna or whoever. Because sometimes it's related to a fault, like a wine fault, like Brettanomyces, or oxidation, or something else like from a different bacteria, or it could be an earthy, herbaceous, rustic kind of thing. A lot of Negro Amaro can be, a lot of people will call them rustic wines because they have this kind of earthy, funky, herbal thing, but still some fruit, still some big fruit. So, and it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what that funk is unless sometimes you have to submit it to a lab and find out what the funk could be. But it's interesting, and I'm glad that you decanted it too, or at least are willing to try it and then wait a while, try it, because it is amazing how much wines can change. I think both when your mouth becomes acclimated to it. So the first or second sip, whenever I tell anyone who I'm tasting with, pointers or anything on tasting wine, I always say, just get the first sip out of the way and don't think about it, because so many times you have to introduce that liquid to your body to really start knowing what it is. A lot of that's chemically too. You want to have tannin and acid and sugar and all these things in your mouth, because the first sip's always going to be shocking. And I think too, aroma wise, like the funk can be kind of shocking before you get to the meat of everything. And then again, over time, as wine sits and as it swirls, or as you get more oxygen in it, it can definitely change and have a different experience. That's fun. That's fascinating though. And part of it is like, I just want to taste all the Italian reds and whites, the Italian wines. If I had to choose one country to drink all their wines for the rest of my life, it would be Italy, I'm pretty sure. Don't tell my boss, but that's great. That was fun. Thanks for sharing. Any other takers? Anyone want to share a wine that they're trying for the first time in our new varietal support group? Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, actually, I just have a question relating to Italian reds. The Primitivo, as I understand it, is exactly the same as Zinfandel. But tell me, why is it that in Washington State we can't grow Zinfandel or Primitivo? And what are the characteristics that prevent that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you're right. So the genetically, the grape Primitivo is the same as Zinfandel, which is the same as Krojanic Kastelanski, I think is how you pronounce it. It's a Croatian grape. It's originally from Croatia, so that's where the grape originated, and then they brought it over across the Adriatic Sea to Italy, and then eventually to the New World and in California, and where it became Zinfandel. I know that there are a few producers that are making Zinfandel in Washington, so it is growing. Part of the tricky part, and I'll look this up, this is a good opportunity for fact checking, is having enough. No, it can't be because of not having enough sun, because we definitely have enough sun. I know that where it's grown now is Wahluke Slope in Washington. At least I think it's in Wahluke, and which is one of our hottest regions. So I think you need a lot of heat units to ripen Zinfandel. And even the way it ripens, the way Zinfandel ripens, it's a top-heavy cluster. You have a really wide cluster, and the bottom sometimes doesn't get enough ripeness, and that's where you can get uneven ripeness. Kind of like Grenache, and we were talking about the other week, where you have overripe flavors, underripe flavors, and but there's also, you know, I'm sure there's places in Washington where we can grow it well if we really tried. I wonder if it's also more of a market question and more of an economy question, because thinking about, you know, water rights, or, you know, there's places where it might be perfect to grow, you know, geologically or geographically, but we might not just have enough water there, or not. But then again, can you charge as much money for a bottle of Zinfandel as you can Cabernet? And, you know, I think a lot of growers might opt for other grape varieties that would grow in that same land other than Zinfandel. A lot of Zinfandel, you know, I think from California, the reason Zinfandel is big is more tradition, I think, because it was one of those grapes that during, you know, pre-prohibition, but back when they first planted, was really big. They had that tradition there where then all of a sudden they found these really old vines, and it became this cool old vine Zinfandel thing. And that's also Petit Syrah came in there too, where you had field blends of Zinfandel, Petit Syrah, all these old grapes. And these grapes, a lot of these grapes were planted then during Prohibition because they were thicker skinned grapes. Because for grape growers during Prohibition, one of their main sources of income, if they didn't have sacramental purchasers, so people that were making wine for sacramental purposes, by law you were still allowed to make a certain amount of wine for yourself. So they could ship the wines all across the country to different buyers who were just making their own wine, but they needed varieties with thicker skins that would make the journey. And so Zinfandel, Petit Syrah were some of these grapes they planted so that it would make the train ride all the way back to the East Coast. So it, you know, who knows if it was necessarily planted there because it was the perfect grape for that area or that terroir, or if it was more just practical of just having grapes like that. So yeah, it's interesting. But I'll look more into specifically Washington and why Zinfandel isn't grown as much as it could be. It's a good question. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Well, what do we think? Any other people want to share what they're maybe trying for the first time? It's 5:20. This is pretty good timing here. So, well, that was fun. That was great. And I really like just how exploring, or that's not the word, how willing you are to explore and do new things. And, you know, it's fun to try things you're not comfortable with, but I hope that we can keep doing this. When I post the next, 10 or so episodes, we'll do another one of these down the road, because there's always new wines to try. Like I said, there's about 1,300 Vitis vinifera varieties in commercial production in the world. So I'm sure we can all find another one we've never had before and do this again. The hope is that, maybe you heard someone talk about a wine tonight. You're like, oh, wow, that sounds fascinating. I'll post all the wines that we tried tonight on the website so that you could check back and explore and if you're interested. But other than that, I thought that was a successful, supportive, safe group effort by all of us. So thank you all for doing that with me.
What's next week?
That was a great question. Next week, so we're actually bottling next week on Thursday and Friday of next week. So we are going to talk about wine bottles next Thursday, and it'll go back. There'll be some PowerPoint. So I'll do some research and just do some a little talk about the history of wine bottles and glass bottles and why they're in different shapes and different sizes and what's important about them. But I thought it would make sense because I'm gonna help them bottle all day, so I'll have to get my stuff done before then. But we'll be in the midst of bottling our next vintage. So wine bottles, and then the week after that is when I'll have Chris Peterson, our winemaker, as a guest star to do a little library vintage tasting. And actually, I know it's 2 weeks out, but we will be tasting older vintages of Sestina and Valerie, two of our Bordeaux style wines that we're releasing right after that. If you want to join in and be a part of the discussion, you don't necessarily have to have old Sestina and Valerie to join us, but if you find any wine that's old, so I would say any wine that's older than 5 years, if you can get 7 years, 10 years, that'd be really fun. But if you can find wine that's older and want to join us in that, that's great. If you don't want to drink wine but still want to join us and learn some things, that's even better. Because we'll not only talk about those specific wines, but about how wines age in general and sort of what happens to them. So that's what we're doing. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I hope everyone stays warm and safe. I know it's crazy all over the country right now with winter and whatnot. So be well, and we'll see you next week. If you want to unmute to say goodbye, happy to.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, Eli.